Good morning. I'm Cynthia Lorenzi, and we are filming here live and in person at the offices of Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman. Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw is our sponsor for our CEO Chick Chat series. We can't tell you what a great relationship is. They absolutely encourage, support, and embrace women's initiatives and talking about the journey to success. And our conversation today is with Linda Cureton. Linda is the Chief Information Officer of NASA, so she doesn't have a very impressive job title, but we're going to try to find out what makes her life interesting. And prior to that, she was the CIO of Goddard. So I think we've got some interesting things to talk about. Welcome, Linda. I'm thrilled that you're here.
Thank you.
I've been thinking a lot about you, and when we always do a pre-interview prior to our taping so that we can kind of warn you what it's really going to be like. So I hope you're comfortable. Anything you share, it's okay. It's safe to share it here, and we can actually cut it out of the video if you want.
Okay.
But one of the things I want to talk about, I thought a lot about this. You are a local girl.
Right.
You're born and raised in Washington, D.C.
Yes, I am.
But you come from a military background.
Yes, somewhat, yeah.
Yeah.
So I am technically born in Bethesda, Maryland, because that's where the hospital was. Bethesda Naval Medical Center. My father was in the Navy. And, but we lived in Washington, D.C. That's where I grew up. I went to D.C. public schools and all that kind of stuff. My parents separated when I was about 3 years old, so that was the extent of my military career right there. And for the most part, we were in one place in Northeast Washington, D.C., and then moved to Northwest Washington, D.C. when I was in junior high school.
I've thought a lot about you, and your story is about breaking the rules. It's about doing the unconventional, and I think we talked about your dad, and I think, you know, we talked about this. I think your dad's story is really, really important because it's about what happens sometimes when you break the rules, maybe not for the best reason, but I think it's real. Let's talk a little bit about your dad. Even though, you know, your dad and your mom divorced when you were 3, he still did become an important figure in your life and a lesson teacher. But let's talk about what he did, because I think that's an incredible story about how one moment, one decision changes everything to follow.
Right. My brother always describes my father by telling the story about my father. My father had a sort of a checkered life of ups and downs. He died at age 57, which about 15 years ago, I think that's what it was. And my brother tells this story. My brother's a professional musician. His name is David. My father's name was David also. And my brother says, well, if it weren't for the fact that our father was a screw-up, that he wouldn't be there today. And so we said, okay, David, what does that mean? Well, we lived at the time in Norfolk. And my father, like my brother, was a musician in the Navy. He was in the Navy band. And he decided to go AWOL, and he broke into the locker, stole the instrument, and went out on a gig to get paid. Well, he got caught. He got thrown into the brig, and he wasn't able to travel with the band to a gig they had, I think, somewhere in South America. And I think they had the black band and the white band, so it was pretty much
Oh,
not,
really?
yeah.
I didn't know that. It was
Right.
segregated, not integrated.
Right, and
That's
so
interesting.
That group, the African-American musicians, they were killed in a plane crash. And my father avoided that because he was in the brig. So then after that, my brother was conceived in Portsmouth, Virginia, and had he not been screwed up and in jail, then my brother wouldn't have been created.
So you think about life, you know, even though he broke the rules, it's because of it. And I know your relationship with your brother is one of your closest relationships. You love your brother dearly. I've met him. He's charming. I understand. You know, I can see he probably is like your dad, who's probably extraordinarily charming too.
Right. My father he had a amazing sense of humor. He had a whole portfolio of jokes. You know, he could spring one out on anyone, clean, dirty, in between, that kind of stuff. He was a minister of music at his little country church in Richmond, Virginia, and he had a whole portfolio of church musician jokes. Well, this isn't a joke, but one thing that he really did, he had, you know, it's a little country church, little old ladies, they come there every Sunday, and so he had the choir. And he was trying to teach the choir a song, and it was so bad. He said, folks, we're going to put this song away. Y'all are intercoursing this song up. And so they reacted. They said, okay, fine. They put the song away. And then one of the ladies went home and opened up the dictionary to look up what intercourse meant. Oh, my God. And then it turned him into the pastor. And so the pastor called him in and said, Brother Marsh, you cannot use language like this. The church sisters, they're very delicate. And then he said, well, Pastor, you should have heard the song. But he was funny and he was talented, and he struggled in life. His health was poor. He was morbidly obese. He did all the things you're not supposed to do, with that. He drank too much, he smoked too much, and he didn't eat right. And all those habits in life caught up with him, where he died of a heart attack at age 57.
I think, one thing when you and I talked about your dad is that he would share with you, baby girl, don't do this. And I think that was really interesting that, how we teach lessons sometimes or learn lessons. So I think there's really, let's talk a little bit about your mom. Now, what did your mom do?
My mother was a licensed practical nurse. For most of my life, she worked as a private duty nurse. And then I think when I was in high school, or junior high school, something like that, she went to what was at the time Freedman's Hospital, which back in the day, hospitals were segregated. So if you were of a certain age and was born in Washington, D.C., and African American, you were born at Freedman's Hospital. But Freedman's Hospital eventually became Howard University Hospital, and that's where she ended up working as a nurse and then eventually retiring.
Interesting. I always, we've had Barbara Lang, we've had other women here, and we've talked some about, we've lived a life now where we've come through segregation and integration, and because of my life experience raised, for the most part, overseas, I lived in an integrated world, so I was always astonished at segregation. I didn't understand it. I just never have been able to, so I think it's really interesting to come through your life and see that. But I thought a lot about you because we talked about your interest, and your life is improbable. I mean, when you're born and, you've had the dad who was thrown in the brig and was a musician, and your mother was a nurse, what lens did you see your life? What did you say, what's Linda Cureton going to grow up to be? What did you see when you were a little girl growing up?
Well, I never thought I'd go to college. I didn't think that my folks my mother remarried. There are 4 of us all together, so with the zany father, there was 3, and then there was the stable stepfather, which is my baby sister's father. She married in '66. He's died now, but he was a Capitol policeman, so he Capitol Police, and he eventually retired as a detective there. So it was pretty much a structured life, that kind of thing. But I didn't think that we had a means that I could go to college, so I didn't, even though it was a hope that I had, I never thought that I would actually do it. I went through, one time in junior high school, I decided that I wanted to study math. I wanted to be a math teacher because I had a crush on my math teacher, so I just had to be a math teacher too. And so it's funny because every time you get a crush on somebody, you want to do that. Yeah, I want to do that. No, I want to do this. 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 So I wanted to do that. So, but it pretty much stood, with me. But I couldn't. There was this thing. Well, teaching. You're not going to get rich teaching, right? And so I said, well, it'd be nice to get rich. And then I realized, well, it'd be nice to go to college at all. So I thought for a minute to be a musician because I studied music in high school. I went to Duke Ellington School of the Arts in Washington, D.C. And I was in the D.C. Youth Orchestra. So I thought, well, maybe I'll do that. But I realized that I would have to practice hours, like my brother did, hours and hours, and I just didn't want to practice. I played trumpet and French horn, and I decided I didn't want to do that, so I switched back to thinking about math. Talking about improbable, that dream of college, by the time I got to high school, My mother had made a decision to stop private duty nursing and go to work for Howard University, so as a benefit that her kids would be able to go to Howard University and go to college. But that didn't cover everything, and I still didn't have enough money to pay for the fees, which, as I remember, it might have been like about $3,000, but it could have been $3 million to me then, because I didn't have $300. I just didn't have any money. So even with that, I didn't really have a good way to go. But I had time to think about it, and I was in the 11th grade and just sort of exploring, you know, what to do, having a good time playing the French horn, basically, is what I was doing. So in the performing arts school, the counselor was trying to get me bound for college. So I had to cram all those college classes in and all the music classes in at the same time, assuming that I wasn't going to go the musician route, I was going to go academic route. So I had to squeeze all these academic classes in and still get all my music classes in so I could graduate from what was then the first graduating class of Duke Ellington School of the Arts.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
the first graduating class. So in the 11th grade, I applied for a high school college internship program and sort of forgot about it. You know, just, well, you know, I'll forget about it. And so what that program was is that I would skip my last year of high school, the 12th grade, and be a freshman in college. So I applied for that. Just never heard anything, didn't know it was going to happen. And then I remember the day distinctly because in D.C. back then, school started the Tuesday after Labor Day. And it was the Wednesday before Labor Day, and I was just winding up my summer, getting ready to go back to school, going to be a senior, going to rule the school, and all that kind of stuff. And then that day, Wednesday, I got a call that I was accepted in this program that I forgot I had even applied for. And I said, well, great, you know, what is it? You know, well, it's going to be Howard University, you're going to be a freshman, you're going to take a full freshman load, it's all paid. We buy your books, we give you bus fare to get back and forth to school and a little stipend. I said, wow. The only thing is the last day of registration was like tomorrow and had to go run out and register for classes and I didn't, I mean, it was just a shock. I didn't have time to think about what do I major in, what about college. I just had to go jump in and go through
you know
it.
It's almost maybe it was a gift that it came to the last minute. You didn't have a chance to talk yourself out of it, to say, I'm not deserving, I won't work, I'm not smart enough, they're going to have opportunities. You didn't have a chance to talk yourself out of. And you make me think of this, this Confucius, this saying that I read a long time ago. I love it. Luck is the wisdom to take advantage of an opportunity when it presents itself. Luck is the wisdom to take advantage of an opportunity when it presents itself. And that's exactly what you did. When you had great fortune, you signed up for a class, this opportunity, totally forgot about it. The day before when you have to be registered, somebody calls and says, you're going to be a freshman at school, so that means you're going to give up a lot of kids would have gone, oh, I can't give up my senior year, that's, you know, party time, cutting class, and you said, I'm going to go to college. And everything was paid for.